As always on BizToday, we get our latest story or trend of the day, and we get an expert in studio to help us understand. The month of July is dedicated to funding. So on BizToday, we have Yunus Paruk, who is our National Marketing Manager at Baraka Bank, South Africa. Now, Baraka Bank was established in 1989 and provides local communities with an essential alternative to conventional banking models. Sharia-compliant banking is becoming increasingly attractive to a growing number of both Muslim and non-Muslim clients in South Africa. Following a faith-based system of financial management, Baraka Bank draws its guiding principles from Sharia, which promotes profit sharing while prohibiting the payment of the receiving of interest in any transaction. The bank's board of directors comprise international and local business people, all demonstrating outstanding individual business skills and collective expertise and experience in Islamic banking. In 2015, the bank appointed Mr. Muhammad Kaka, an executive director, international banking, and Mark Kanene as a non-executive director to the board, bringing the total number to 14. Now, Mr. Yunus Paruk here in studio, our National Marketing Manager, has been with Baraka Bank for 9 years. Tertiary qualifications include BCom, DIP, MBA, certificate in Islamic banking and law, experience in pharmaceutical industry, and has quite an impressive resume, is also a radio presenter, appeared on selected television stations, and is married with 3 children. Welcome to BizToday, Mr. Yunus Paruk.
Thank you very much for having me, Nazareen. It's been a pleasure to come back to Deen TV. I've been here a few times, but it's a pleasure to be on your show.
It's wonderful to have you in studio. Now, as you know, we've chosen a selected July as the month of funding, and funding is a critical or key, I think, area of interest for any entrepreneur or startup business or any kind of business, be they in a small or a large phase. And there are different key ideas around that. I don't think particularly entrepreneurs really understand it sometimes. So what are the types of funding or loan models does the bank offer, and how is it different from other funding or loan models out there?
I think that's an excellent question, because absolutely entrepreneurs need resources, and without funding you really can't do anything.
Of course.
Now let's look at the question of funding that Baraka Bank lends or finances. What actually happens that in Islamic banking, remember that it operates off an Islamic banking platform, right? And they are the models basically in Islamic banking, or the modes of financing, approximately 3 to 4. But for our purposes in terms of funding, right, we look at 2 models, which is Murabaha, which means cost plus, and Musharaka, which means a partnership agreement. However, before I get to those models of financing, let's look at the types of financing that Baraka does. What we do finance, remember also Islamic banking is asset based. One cannot walk into the bank and ask for a finance of 100,000 rand, because obviously you can't. I mean, you got to create, it's got to have an asset. You got to sort of, from an Islamic perspective, there's empowerment, wealth creation, because you could obviously go and lose that money, which would help nobody. So what actually happens is that then it's asset based, which means that there's an underlying asset in every time that you finance. If we finance you and if you're successful. So yes, we offer motor vehicle finance, equipment finance, trade finance, commercial property, and residential property. Okay. So obviously for an entrepreneur, an entity, there is certainly a wide range, but remember, it's very important for us to understand Islamic banking, there has to be an underlying asset.
So you mentioned at the beginning there were 2 types of funding models.
Correct.
One was a partnership agreement,
and one was a Murabaha, which means cost plus. Now let's just explain Murabaha in its simple terms. Individual A comes to Baraka Bank and wishes to purchase a motor vehicle, for example, 100,000 rands.
Right.
What the bank then does is that adds on a profit to that particular sale of that motor vehicle, okay, to finance the client, and the client has an option of paying that motor vehicle off at a fixed rate over a fixed term, agreed upon at the onset of the contract. So obviously what happens here now, as opposed to conventional banking, you don't have variable interest rates, etc., etc. Right. So that individual or that entity knows that I'm paying a fixed amount every month for the duration of the contract. You also cannot put in ad hoc lump sums. However, However, you could settle the contract in full. So the the contract could run from example 12 months right up to 60 months.
So
72 months, sorry.
Prospective applicant would with a particular applicant, and what are those? Okay, before we just go to that question, sorry, I just missed out on the musharaka. Musharaka basically means a partnership agreement, right. Usually done, on the residential and commercial property. For example, individual A wants to purchase a house, at R1 million or just under R1 million. So of course there's a term that we would do, but what would happen is we usually ask for a deposit. So assuming if it's 500,000 Rand, there's a deposit of say 10%. So that's what actually happens now is your client is 10% and you own 90% of the thing. Okay, so every year it diminishes until the property is transfer onto the individual. It almost sounds like a bit like conventional banking, where if you applied for a loan at a bank, you'd need a certain amount to go in for the bank to take you seriously, right?
Right. Exactly. There is a deposit. So obviously, you also got commitment from the client that, he's
skin in the game, as they say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, and coming back, sorry, your second, your
question was around the criteria that the bank has for a particular applicant. Because of course, if you're thinking about, if I go into a bank, would I need to have a certain amount of collateral? Would my IP work as an individual? Or I know we're going to explore that a bit further on in our interview, but what kind of criteria does the bank have in order to be able to successfully award somebody and say, yes, we're going to invest in this business because we know that it will work?
That's again an important question. I think the criteria that the bank would obviously look at is first and foremost is the soundness of the business,
sure.
Feasibility. Does the individual have a business plan? Remember also that our banking, we are of course subjected to regulatory legislation. So you have the National Credit Act,
yeah.
Okay, and other legislation pertaining to business. And in terms of financing, in the conventional way, say lending or borrowing. So obviously these are important criteria that the bank has to look at. Also, for example, is the business, if it's an entity, is it a registered business? Okay, Are they tax compliant? Okay, do they have a business plan in place? And other criteria that we would look at. So obviously we look at mainly the financial situation of the business, the soundness of the business, and if they have sort of business plans and where they want to take this business to. They're going to have some sort of platform.
Are you able to help maybe clients, if they come in, a prospective applicant, are you able to help them with, and I know this is not something we discussed previously, but are you able to help people with getting their businesses on the right track in order to qualify for that funding?
I think that's important. Yeah, I do understand where you're coming from, because I think obviously the entrepreneurial side and the SMEs are a very important aspect of banking today. Yes, Al Baraka Bank can offer an assistance there. There are, of course, startup businesses, for example, franchise operations that people come with.
Is that the more popular type of
very popular, very popular. Once again, there are certain criteria that have to be met. For example, if the person come in, obviously he's got to have some sort of experience, not necessarily a tertiary qualification, sure, but experience in some sort of business. If he does not have that, again, it's based on the profile of the individual and the entity. So the criteria is based on that. For example, if you get individual A who doesn't have any experience, but he has people around him who have expertise, we would look at that, not to say no. Then also very important is to understand that is there a plan in place? Is there market research done for this? Has the product been so we would assist him and guide him and say, look, you're starting up. We can see the potential in this business. Yes, we can fund you provided you meet our criteria. So obviously at the same time, you're guiding him to see that he has some experience. Imagine having a business. I mean, up to 90% of small businesses fail today. Why? Sure. Why? Simply because they don't have a plan in place, they don't have a vision. It's about getting down and planning your business, finding out beforehand pre-planning as to what you want to do, the markets, segmenting the markets, doing your market research. Obviously, these are important things before you start your business. So this is one of the things that the bank will advise and also, mitigate the risks in terms of ventures like this or finance like this.
You've hit on two important keywords for me that I really identify with, which is planning and vision. And I suppose that's where, it was interesting for me to know the bank can have a certain set of criteria in order to assess an application, but then you look at the individual themselves, which you were speaking about. So when the bank is doing an assessment, what does an individual or an applicant need to have on their CV or portfolio, which is not tangible, because the others are all tangible, that you'd be able to say, yes, I think this business is going to work, and so it will help me to make my decision much better in favor of that application?
I think for us, once again, I mean, you obviously, we would look at his CV or in terms of individual, of course, his qualifications. That means he has maybe technical or tertiary qualifications, maybe in a business field. They could also be, for example, a professional, a medical professional who's just qualified, okay? And he wishes to open a practice, for example. One cannot sort of prejudice him in that way, because we can see the potential in this particular professional giving service to the community and running his practice. So yes, Baraka will look at that, assist him with, for example, purchasing his equipment for his dental practice and so forth. So yes, but again, to us, what's very important is some sort of experience or some sort of vision that this particular individual has. He's got to come back with a plan to us that we know that, look, we can back this man. Because obviously, over and above that, we got to ensure that our investors are protected. At the same time, we got to ensure that he is protected from sort of a failing business. So it's a two-pronged issue in terms of assisting the entrepreneur and saving the investors as well.
It does sound very much like the bank is geared towards assisting an entrepreneur realize their dream, very much against the conventional method where you go into a bank or in funding institution and the first thing they want to see is your credible portfolio or the fact that you've had this business for a while, the numbers are looking good, or whatever it may be. But it sounds like the funding models allow you to have a bit of leeway as an entrepreneur who may have a startup idea, but you don't know how to pull that off. You have the vision and the passion for it, but it sounds like the bank may recognize that first and foremost before looking at other criteria. Yes?
Again, it depends on the profile of the client. Yeah. It's very important. Obviously, the criteria or the application at that particular point in time would depend. As I said earlier, Nazareen, it's important, as you mentioned the conventional banks as well, it's all about numbers. Baraka, it may not be about numbers. We will assist and guide you to ensure that your business
meet those numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Because you got to come to us with they got to be about a soundness. They got to be a track record. They got to be a clear record that the individual is going to succeed. Because we don't want to put him at risk of his business.
I know we've labored over that point, but it was critical for us to understand that, because a lot of the viewers watching may have an idea that they want to action, execute. They have the necessary business plan, they've put one together, they've had a little bit of experience in running that business and may have prior experience from working. So it gives them a bit of hope to say, yes, okay, there's a bit of clarity around this, because I think a lot of the time entrepreneurs are not very able in that area of being funded or pitching properly, and so don't have any clarity about it, and it's quite a scary, murky field to walk. Yeah. But what are the particular businesses that the bank funds, or is it all types?
Well, we do a sole proprietor, we do closed corporations, we do entities, PTY limiteds, and of course the professional. For us, the bank is really growing. We don't try to sort of disadvantage anybody in the sense that the professional market is huge, Nazareen. Today we saying entrepreneur, but we got people that are coming out with technical qualifications. Right? Not just doctors in the medical field, but across the board. Now, these people obviously come here opening, a business or a practice or something in that field. The bank is open to that. So yes, there's a lot of opportunity. It's not only companies, okay? You got the closed corporations, you got the sole proprietor, all these people. But as I've said, and I'm repeating this again, that we have to look at each individual based on the criteria of his qualifications, his experience, in order not to put him at risk of failing his business.
Sure.
But yes, we will play a very important role to say, look, we will guide you along these lines and we will assist him. Because I think that's what it's all about. I mean, the bank itself, is an Islamic bank, okay? So obviously, Islamic banking is about underlying assets, creating wealth, empowerment. And the bank itself, you're talking about entrepreneurship. Let's just take this off a little bit there. Islamic banking also talks about social initiatives. The bank itself has gone into huge social initiatives. For example, we created entrepreneurs out of a legacy garden for 25 years.
Sure.
Okay, so we open up a garden and where we've got women involved in growing this, and they actually sell this thing back to the bank, and we're looking at other outlets, supermarkets. So what I'm saying is the bank in itself created a sort of a self-empowerment type of thing.
So a platform where entrepreneurs are given the tools and then the access to market.
Absolutely, the tools, the assistance, we obviously pay them as well. So it's actually part and parcel of Islamic banking, and that's what it's all about.
So when I was thinking about the whole concept of funding and trying to talk to particular people who have an expertise in the different types or areas of funding, you get venture capitalists, you get the conventional method of going into a bank or any other institution that can lend you that money, provide it as a grant or any other type of funding. But I think my thinking around this is, and you want to understand is, does an applicant have to pitch for funding? Because generally the pitching process is something where you think about a Dragon's Den or a Shark Tank type situation. Is that the case at the bank, or do they just come in and apply?
We don't want to bring him there, make him sit in front of a team of panels and ask him a whole lot of questions. I don't think
anybody at the bank is that scary, right?
No, not at all. I mean, we've got an excellent team, and I promise you they will not scare any of the people away. So you're right, we got no sharks or anything at the bank. So what I would say is that yes, he doesn't have to come in personally and pitch anything. What would do is he was fill in the required documents, right? Whether it's regulatory, also as his application. So all the documents are there. They obviously get analyzed by a particular team and a particular department, and the various criteria are looked at. And
is that the general standard,
that's
though?
That's the general standard. There's no delay thing about he doesn't have to come in. I think that's not being fair to somebody, to putting them in a corner. Obviously, he's got his documents, he's got his business plan, he knows where he wants to go. It's up to the bank to now, look at his application, give him the best advice, and decide the way forward.
Okay, so I know we've been talking a lot about funding and going to a bank and trying to apply, but just to get your thoughts around entrepreneurs pitching for funding. So you go and you look for seed capital, or what the San Francisco startup based, the whole model there is to go out and find VCs. But just to understand your viewpoint and working in the industry, what do you think entrepreneurs are doing wrong when they're pitching? Because not a lot of them are successful. What are they missing that they're not able to secure that type of funding? Is it in their delivery? Is it in the vision of their business, the passion they're putting across?
I think they have the passion, but they need to obviously come back and put some numbers together. And that's again very important. You got to have, as we said earlier, and I think it relates to the earlier discussion that we had, if they have a business plan in place, they have identified the markets, they've identified the products that they want to sell, okay? And today, as you rightfully said earlier on, I mean, franchises are one of the hottest things that are going around. I mean, you look every day and there's a new franchise opening and there's all over the show. So it's brilliant. It's brilliant because, I mean, the food industry is, the fast food industry is just growing. I mean, it's all about convenience. Anything you do today is convenience. So I think they got to have that business plan in place. They got to have some numbers coming to us and say, look, this is what we want to do. They've got the passion, because on the basis of that information, we have specialists in the bank that could guide them. There's no fee for that, and say, look, you can do this, you can do that, you can't do that, we can finance you X amount, this is how you should structure it. You understand?
Sure.
So looking at their financial statements, ensuring that they have, a clear record. As I said, the past records, for example, credit bureaus, and they have a clean, clear record. All these things are criteria going forward when we're looking at funding. But having said that, the entrepreneur definitely has a place in our world today, and I think it's very important in creating employment. As long as he has that passion, that motivation, and the will to succeed, I'm sure financial industries would look at somebody like that.
Well, funding is always such an interesting topic, I think, for any business. It's one of the key ideas you would look at in order to grow your business, to take it to the next level. And I think I just have one last idea that I want to explore quickly with you about the services of the bank. But does the bank take equity in a business when they're awarding funding?
No, we don't actually take equity in a business.
So that's pretty much different from what a VC would do.
Yes, absolutely. You won't take equity into a business, no.
Okay, that's fantastic to hear, because I think it's necessary for viewers, aspiring entrepreneurs in the making, to understand the differences between going and applying for a loan, having a partnership agreement, or giving away equity, which could be a bit more, I think, attractive for an entrepreneur. But nonetheless, there are those avenues of funding that are available for an entrepreneur to grow. Yes. Jazakallah for joining us in the studio today. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio to talk about funding and to give us an idea also about the services that the bank offers, because very often you would find that the general public don't have clarity on the services, or they may have an understanding or perception that was told to them by friends and family. So thanks for clarifying that for us.
No, it's a pleasure, and I think I'm glad we, explained, and as you are, earlier on talked about Islamic banking. I think also it's very important that viewers need to actually know about Islamic banking. It's growing substantially, I mean, in South Africa and globally. So yes, it's not only, I think when you talk about entrepreneurs and so forth, it's not only for Muslims.
Yeah.
We're getting a very large people of other faiths, and the created that's exactly the awareness that's created. And it's part of, besides being Islamic, it's being ethical. So obviously you're not funding businesses that are, in Islamic terms, illegal, for alcohol and tobacco and gaming and so forth. So it is socially acceptable to many people of many other faiths on the moral ethics of business as well. So I think that's very important.
Wonderful. Today, as you know, on BizToday, the month of July is dedicated to funding. We had Yunus Paruk, we have Yunus Paruk, National Marketing Manager of Al Baraka Bank, talking to us about the types or models of funding that the bank offers. Coming up, your diary of events. So the hookup dinner happens around South Africa. There's Johannesburg, Durban and Pretoria. Please get on their Facebook page. It's the hookup dinner on Facebook, and connect with them. There's events that happen every month. It's a great place to pitch your business, and you can always go and find them. I think the cost is a minimal amount of 60 Rand. It's a great place for you to network and connect with other people and pitch your business. You don't know who's looking. So be sure to check them out on Facebook, the hookup dinner. The next event on your list that should be in your diary already is My Biz Expo. So the National Small Business Chamber, NSBC, presents the 7th season of My Business Expo, also incorporating Business Startup Expo, access to finance in Daba. July is the month of funding on our show. My Business Seminars, and the world famous buzz party that gets you talking with others. Port Elizabeth, they're coming to you on the 13th of August. Cape Town, you're up on the 10th of September. As My Biz Expo, go to mybizexpo.co.za for a free registration. And finally, the Empowered Administrators Conference is coming up 3rd and 4th of September at the Gateway Hotel in Durban. It's a wonderful conference to be attending. If you're in any kind of corporate or private sector, as well as public sector, to be able to up your entrepreneurial skills, become an entrepreneur in the space of being an employee. So remember, administrators are not just secretaries or typists, but they're real people who are the backbone of an organization. So if you're an administrator in an organization, the Empowered Administrators Conference is coming up 3rd and 4th of September. Be sure to visit eaconference.co.za. And also be sure to follow at BizToday_ZA on Twitter for our latest updates of our show, as well as more learnings about being an entrepreneur. You can also follow me on Twitter at Nazareen E, that's NAZAREENE, for latest inspirational business tips. That's it for our show today. Goodbye.